Okay, everybody ready? Places, please. Lights. Camera.
Sarah Cogan.
And action.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Offstage. I am your host, Renée Yaworsky, and tonight we have a wonderful guest here for you tonight to all get to learn to love just as much as I do. I've been researching her and learning all about her, and she has so much to teach all of us. So I'm so grateful that she's here tonight. Her name is Sarah Cogan. She is a highly in-demand costume designer, a visual producer. She likes to champion indie filmmakers. She's also the host of her own podcast. So I want to ask her about that a little bit, called Designing the Void. Designing the Void is so cool. They get so deep into the nuts and bolts of the filmmaking industry, how films are created and made on almost a molecular level. It's very, very fascinating. And she also founded and operates her own boutique costume rental shop in Brooklyn, where she also supports indie filmmakers. And as if that's not enough, she's also currently writing a book that's going to serve as a Bible for indie filmmakers to understand how to use design in their story as a filmmaker. So there's so much to cover, and we don't have enough time to cover it. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Sarah Cogan, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Renee. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
Oh, you are doing so much. I was wondering if you're taking vitamin B or what are you doing where you have all this energy? You are accomplishing so much. And the first thing I want to ask you about is how do you find that passion and motivation to be as accomplished as you are? So many people give up on their dreams. So many people don't want to be bothered or they don't believe in themselves. So are you just a highly confident person? Do you have a lot of positive people around you? Where do you dig deep, and what do you get out of that to be so amazing as you are?
Oh, thank you. I would say, okay, I mean, it's a day by day thing, right? The one thing that I do is I follow my curiosity. I follow what excites me, and I look to see how I can serve my community, the people that I work with, and what is out there. And that really is what drives me. So the podcast started from wanting to shed light on, when I started designing, I then later started writing my own projects, and I've started to embrace that more in my life recently. And when I was doing that, I joined these smaller film groups, and that ended up bringing me to meet these filmmakers who would be like, I really don't understand how design works for film. And I was like, what? Like, you went to film school. Like, how do you not know that? And they were like, well, we don't really talk about it. And then on the other side, I'm working with all these professional designers, and they're going, well, it's like they don't even understand what we're doing. And I'm going, well, they don't. Like, they literally don't. No one's teaching them this. No one's explaining it to them. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we start to look at what this is? And so that's where the podcast started, which then, which we did. I did one season, and I'm getting ready to come back with that. Yes. And then that's where my workshops came out of how do I then teach this to people? How do we get them to understand what this world is, what design does for their stories, how to think about it? Because there's a fun, I don't know if it's really fun. It's a destructive myth in the industry that is film design is a luxury. And oftentimes people go, it costs so much money. Having film design is a luxury. And it's actually not a luxury at all. It's actually a necessity, because our film's design affects the way that we see and experience the story that we're telling. And we're setting up the context with the design. And so if we don't know how to utilize those tools as filmmakers, then we're not able to convey the story we want to convey. And I personally think that this is why so many young filmmakers are coming out of film school and they're going, but I did everything that the film program said I should do, and yet no one's paying attention to my scripts. No one's looking at my films. They're not getting into film festivals. I don't understand why. And I think personally that it's a big piece is production value, and that comes from understanding design. And so the luxury isn't the design itself. The luxury is actually having somebody take it over for you and to be able to delegate that vision to somebody else. And I think it's in a lot of way delegation, right? You're delegating. I'm going to say, here's my creative vision. This is where I'm taking us all. You're the costume designer. Here's what I want to give you to take. You're the production designer. You're going to take this for the sets, and so on and so forth. And that's the way that it all kind of plays out.
Exactly. And I think you explain a lot of it. Like, people really should go back and listen to the first season of Designing the Void, like I did, because I love, first of all, what is the void? Like, because I said that's such a great name. The void is the camera lens, correct? And there's darkness there. That's the darkness of the void. And like you say in the intro of these episodes, you say, this is not about what story you're telling, but how you tell the story, which really makes a huge difference. So it's putting that spin on of actually imparting your message, because as we know, filmmaking is storytelling. So if you're not putting a lot of focus on design, or if you're not investing in design, you're not investing in your story, i.e. you're not investing in your film, correct?
Yeah, I do really think that. It's interesting because especially when it comes to costume, hair, and makeup, which is character design, we're talking about first impressions. And I mean, even production design is about first impressions, right? When you walk into a space, what does it tell you, right? We as, beings in this world are going out and going, is this environment safe or dangerous?
Right.
Am I going to be hurt here, or am I going to be okay here? This person walking down the street, are they going to harm, are they going to, literally from a evolutionary perspective, are they going to hurt me, or are they friend or foe, right? Do I need to be threatened by them or not? And I will say that that's actually one of the reasons why we get to be very mindful of how we tell our stories, because the way we paint pictures of who people are directly impacts the way people will respond to people out in the world who look similar to the characters that we're portraying. And that is all because of the cognitive science behind why we tell stories and the way that we internalize stories to help us understand and navigate the world that we live in. And so when we're designing consciously and thoughtfully, we're being really clear about what are the first impressions that we're creating with our characters, so that our audience can look at them and understand the situation, or think they understand the situation. Maybe we want them to not realize somebody. I had somebody ask me this on TikTok, like, how do you design a liar? Like, what social class? And I was like, well, that just depends. How you design a liar is dependent. Well, I'm going to pause for a second to let my dog finish drinking.
I love that.
The moment he was like,
I love dogs so much. What's your dog's name, by the way?
His name's Mr. Tibbs. I'm going to just take a step up. Sorry, dude.
Hi, Mr. Tibbs.
He looks cute. He looks like the tramp. So since we're not live, I was like, I'm going to pause for a second. Okay. So talking about liars and creating liars, this question that was asked to me, how do you create a liar in your film? Like, how do I design that? It's not a straight answer. And I think this is why designing and getting design input as a filmmaker is so challenging, and why in the past, I think people haven't known how to go about teaching this. And this is what I've learned is a strong suit of mine. So thinking about creating and designing a liar, the question becomes, well, who knows that this person's a liar? Is it that the audience knows, but the characters in the story don't know? Is it that nobody knows that they're a liar other than the character themselves? Who knows? Because that then determines how we then plant the clues of who this person is, right? Thinking like American Psycho, right? He truly believes that he's done these things. And so we don't realize that he's been lying about these violent fantasies until the end. Sorry if I just ruined that for somebody who hasn't seen it.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. A little late on that one. That's right. That's the kind of idea of we don't know. We don't know the story, then we want to be able to kind of create a world that's like that. And then the other thing is, why are they lying? What is it that they're lying about? Are they saying that they have money when they don't? So then maybe there's somebody who really preems and makes themselves. Look at the story. I think it was Becoming Anna is the name of it, where the woman who created this false identity, and she wanted to show that everybody, Inventing Anna, that's it, Inventing Anna. And she created this whole false persona that she had all this money, and when she didn't, and that was done by presenting herself as someone who had a lot of money, by dressing the part, acting the part, doing her hair and makeup the part, knowing the information. And that's a way of, those are different ways of presenting, for example, a liar, and why someone's out there, and how they're then relating to the other characters.
Exactly.
Mine is all about relationships.
Right. Yeah. Story is relationships. And that's what people get invested in. That's why people care. That's why they tune in week after week if it's an episodic thing. Right. And another thing too, when you're talking about visual, like filmmaking is so visual. If you tweak the colors, the lighting, the shades, whatever, you've got a totally different story. For example, you interviewed someone on your podcast who worked on Kimmy Schmidt. The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And I'm a huge fan of that, simply because if you were to describe that storyline without them seeing any of the visuals, it would seem so dark. This is a woman who was kidnapped, and she was kept in an underground bunker and abused for many years. And now she's trying to assemble her life again. Wow, that is so dark. You take one look at the trailer and you see purples and bright yellows, and you see the fashion choices, that the very loud characters, like Titus Andromedon and Kimmy, and you see how they're dressed, and you say, oh, I'm looking at a comedy now. And you can just tell that instantaneously. And it's all of those decisions. So the visual aspect is something that I think it doesn't always get top billing. Like you said, people think they can almost like just sort of get away with not investing here. But at the end of the day, that's what the fans are really relating to, right?
I mean, I'm going to say yes. That's what I think people are really relating to, right? If we want our audience to connect with the characters and connect with the world of the story, it has to make sense to them. It has to feel tangible. It has to feel, even if it is a sci-fi or a fantasy in a future world, and period worlds, there's a level of approachability. I mean, it's one of the things I talk about when designing period or creating a period film. Period films are inevitably always done through the eyes of the current era of beauty. So the way that a body is dressed, the hair and makeup, all those things, you can see examples through different films. Look at all the different ways that Cleopatra has been depicted in film and television over the decades. And you'll see the influence of each of those eras on the way that she is dressed when the same research is available to all those filmmakers, right? So the actual historical research is exactly the same. And it has to do with how we see and perceive beauty ourselves and what we count as beautiful now. And so it is very much about that kind of creating accessibility to our audience so that they can then relate to it, invest in the story, find a connection to the characters. And if, it's either there are those antagonists that are our hero, the anti-heroes that you love to hate kind of thing.
Right.
And even then there still gets to be something about them that we feel relatable.
Exactly.
Even if it's this built fantasy world. And I always tell people when I'm working on a job that's fantasy or talking to filmmakers about a fantasy sci-fi world, this other world is what's grounded and real in that world of that story. Because the goal is you want every choice that we make to feel like it belongs to the world of the story and the characters and is truthful and authentic to that world. And that once we've done that, then we really are succeeding as filmmakers with the design.
Exactly. Okay. So people who are not in the film business, take them through what your day on set would look like. What is your preparation before you even get there? What is your relationship to the director? What is your relationship to the cast members? What does that actually look like? What are you actually doing when you're there?
Oh, great question. Okay. So the thing that's kind of interesting about filmmaking, and especially as a designer, is every day is different, and there are different phases of the project. So at the beginning of a project, we're in what's called pre-production, and pre-production is the getting ready to do the actual filming process. So in those days, it's a lot about if we haven't already sat down, then the director and I are sitting down, looking at research, talking character. I'm on the phone with the actors, talking character with them, getting their, as a costume designer, getting their sizes, getting, if I'm doing production design, getting the measurements of the spaces, right? We're figuring out the relationships between the characters, the relationships between the spaces and the characters, and how everything fits together from a narrative story perspective. And then once that's completed in the prep process, and it kind of is like a soft edge in terms of how that works, because sometimes we're evolving the design throughout the creative process and throughout the prep process and the production process. And then it's literally going out and gathering things and getting things ready for the filming process. Costumes and production design are 97% complete before shooting actually begins. So oftentimes people think that costume designers aren't doing much because by the time we show up on set, everything's complete. And we're just putting the clothes that have already been altered, that have already been fit, that have already been dyed to the right shade in the rooms, and they're just getting dressed. There's a huge process that goes into getting to that moment. And so, like I mentioned, we're doing fittings during prep. Sometimes because of the way that we shoot films out of order. So the timeline for work, whether it's production design or costume design, comes from a standpoint of what's up first, and that gets handled first, and then we move down the line, which means we might be fitting an outfit that plays, meaning that it shoots, and it's going to be in a scene that's shot 3 weeks into production on the second week of production. And so that we are staggering that time. So the prep is continuing. Let me know if I'm getting a little too detailed about this.
No. I love the details. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And so that's happening simultaneous to then what's the actual shooting process. So as a designer, my job is to come in and make sure that everything kind of gets the seal of approval before, and that's called establishing a shot, or establishing an outfit, or establishing a scene, or opening a set if you're doing the set. And so that's making sure that here's what it looks like. There's nothing that we think we need to change design wise. We're happy with this sweater. We don't, or maybe it's, I realize this sweater is reading too much like the wall. So let's grab that other sweater in the truck and bring that to set and swap that out really fast before we start rolling. And then that's kind of like those final adjustments, or going in with your crew and saying, I really want to see this dressed this way. Or now that I'm seeing this outfit on camera, we need to top stick this thing down, which is like a double stick tape that we use to hold items in place without stitching them. And so it's kind of going in and figuring out and finessing those little moments of details. And then once that's done and complete, then my job as a designer for that moment is done, and I go back to prepping the next moment. And so that's why you'll often see designers come in and out of sets, because they're not there for the whole process. And that's when I turn over the design and the maintenance of the design and what's called the continuity. So the continuity, for those that are just tuning in for the first time on this, is we shot this outfit 3 days ago. It looked like this. Then the next scene that happens directly after this scene, it shoots 2 days later, 3 days later. And we have to make sure that these two match when we cut from scene to scene, because they're shot out of order based on location availabilities, cast availabilities, equipment availability, things like that. And so making that maintenance then goes over and is turned over to the wardrobe crew, who ensures that that's all well maintained and taken care of.
So it's a well orchestrated symphony, right? So talk a little bit about scene work and having to learn how to work with this many people. Everybody has their own designated role, and everybody's sort of working together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's disharmonious, sometimes it's harmonious. Do you have like horror stories? You don't want to, not to out anyone, but I mean, does it really matter? How much does it matter that you have a good team that you can really depend on? And can you really sense when you walk onto set, okay, this is not a great environment? Can you sort of tell if a film is going to make it just by the actual teamwork that's going on?
Yeah, actually, it's a big deal. The way that our teams are set up as designers, as filmmakers, drastically affects the final end result of the film. I have been on films that should not have done as well as they have done. And it was because the crew were so dedicated to the project that they put their heart and soul into something that they didn't, that uh, if they hadn't, it wouldn't have looked as good. And because of that, I look at the film I did, 18 and a half. It was just eligible for this year's, the 2023 Oscars. And
Wow.
we were an indie micro budget feature. And the amount of energy that crew and cast poured into this project, to me, is what made it. We were punching above our weight class, basically.
Right.
And to even be in that pool is pretty incredible, and to have made it that far on, such a tight budget. And it's all because the crew was working together, really supportive of one another, and really invested in the project. And
Right.
and when you don't have that, you won't get that. And I think the thing that people don't realize is that as a filmmaker, this is your baby. This film is your baby. However, and you might only, as a director, be directing one film a year, or one film every other year, or every 2 years. Whereas your design team, your gaffers, your DPs, they're constantly working on other projects. And so knowing why they're invested in your project and what gets them invested in your project will help you to enroll them in your creative vision, to give you the support you're looking for, versus assuming that everybody cares about it as much as you do. And I know that sounds really harsh, and but it's the reality. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's true.
cannot assume that everybody that comes onto your passion project is going to hold it the same way. And that's not a bad thing. Please, like, everyone out there, hear me that. And when I say that, because the reasons why people take jobs are very different. Some people will take a job because of the status it gives them. Some people, and this is something I teach in my workshops around film design, is I teach about how you collaborate with your teammates, and how to understand your teammates, because getting the best out of people is your job as a filmmaker, as a producer, as a director. Like, that's your job, to figure out who's this person and what they need in order to do their best work, so that I get the best product and the best result from them. I'm responsible for, and I say this even as a department head, when I'm designing, I am responsible for the quality of work that my team produces on a project. And if I'm not getting clear about what they want to get out of this job, then I've done a disservice to them, in order of, in terms of making sure that this is a win-win for both of us. And a win-win really means it's a win for them, it's a win for me. And so what does that look like? And so that's what I think it's really important to make sure that you're looking at your crew and going, what is it that you're here for? What do you want? What are you, it could be that someone's excited about exploring something creatively. And so that means giving them a little extra room to own that. And there's an amazing thing about ownership with your crew. When you give people ownership over a part of a project, they actually give you more.
Right, because they're a part of it. They're invested now, right?
Yeah.
This is their baby too now. You've signed them onto that. And so, of course.
Yeah. And that's where you also are. I personally feel like the magic happens, because that's when you get the ideas that are better than you thought. I truly believe that the creative process is about discovery and letting the best idea win versus my idea win.
Right. Okay.
And as the director and as the producers, if somebody else has a really great idea that serves your story, you get to own that. You said yes to it.
Yeah, sure.
So
exactly.
it's really, it's just as much yours then, because you said, yeah, let's run with it.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so important to, morale can really, I've been on jobs where I was on another film, and the production company was paying the payroll company. The payroll company had not cut anyone's checks for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And the production company didn't know this. And the entire crew almost mutinied and almost walked off the film without. And the thing that was wild is nobody went to them to be like, hey, I haven't gotten paid yet, because they just assumed that they were being taken advantage of. And I mean, that's the other thing. We have to be really mindful of what the assumptions we make. And so this this production company was literally almost lost their entire crew and their crew's morale over the fact that somebody else messed up their job, but ultimately they're responsible. And ultimately they're the ones that the crew are going to look back to say, you know, hey, this isn't cool. And it means that people won't show up. It means that
Right.
people
Yeah.
start spreading negativity on set. And I mean, it's kind of like moldy strawberries, right? Negativity on set is that mold in your strawberries or
It's a
your box,
contagion. Yeah.
and it just spreads really fast, and then everything goes bad. And I think it's really important to, you know, and that's also why I believe in firing people when they're not the right fit. Oftentimes people want to muscle through it on a production because, oh, it's a short-term period project. Like, we don't need to worry about it. Like, we'll just get through this. And I'm like, don't just get through it. If they're not the right fit, you're doing a disservice to both of you to hold them on, and you should let them
Right.
go somewhere where they feel empowered and
Exactly.
get the support you need.
Yeah,
So
it's very possible that they don't even want to be there, or that them doing crappy work looks now bad for them in their portfolio, right? So it's not helping anybody. And it's not about better or worse than, it's about the right fit for a specific role. I talk about that all the time. And sometimes you have to have that conversation with someone and say, you know what, you would better serve yourself and the industry by working over here. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And that's not an unhealthy conversation. In fact, that's a very positive conversation, I feel.
yeah, 100%. I'm 100% with you. Like, I think that that's
That's the right thing to do. But a lot of people don't, they shy away from that, or they think, well, I don't want confrontation.
Mhm.
But one question I had for you is, can you think of anything out there right now? Like, what are when you're watching Netflix, or you go to the movies, what are the films or the shows that are really inspiring you right now visually, that you would recommend for people to go and check out, that would be sort of something that you think is very stunning?
Yeah. Gosh, well, I really enjoyed, it was kind of an overall show note of Cruel Summer that was just out. It's a what network was it on? It's a mini series, I believe. And it's set in 3 years, and I thought they did a really great job of making it really clear of what year, you know, where in the story you are, and it's a crime thriller of like, and a who done it and what's the truth. And they did such a great job with the writing to lay out the puzzle pieces of the who knew what for people, and then the way that perspective played into each different episode, and when you
Oh,
watched it, whose perspective you were watching it through. And I thought that one was really, really great in terms of how they handled that, and I thought that was really well done. And then another film that I thought was, these are a little older ones, but The English, oh, chef's kiss. I think the design on that is fantastic, and it's great because we don't often see colorful Westerns that are grounded in reality. It
mhm.
was, it was a very grounded, colorful Western, which really was the world. People, the 1800s is the birth of aniline dyes, and aniline dyes are the first synthetic dyes that really gave us these bright pops of color. And when I
Right.
watched the series, it really looked like some of those old paintings of the West, of like, people capturing the vibrancy of the West, and the, you just saw in these kind of landscape or
Oh,
semi-landscape
that's so cool.
photos. So I think that was one that I also tell people, go look at that. That's an incredibly beautifully designed film or series. And so again, that's The English I believe that's on Prime. And another one that I also thought was, that one's definitely like and the story on that one's also great. And the other one that I would say, I mean, another one, this is The Electric Life of Charles Mann, I believe is his name. And he was a painter in the 1800s who painted cats. He's apparently the reason, or credited with the reason, why we have house cats now, that he loved cats and did these like funny cat caricatures.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And he started doing all these like psychedelic color palettes back when nobody else was doing it. And the way they utilized color in that film, the issue with the artist, the title character artist, is that he never dated any of his artwork, so no one actually knows what came first in terms of colors and all these things. But he does these amazing like psychedelic cats, and so the way that the filmmakers interpreted it is that as he descended into insanity, the psychedelic colors became the colors in his world became more vivid, and the way that they play with that through the color correction in the film is phenomenal. And that was one, and also the production and costumes and like the world building, and that is also just beautifully done, very grounded, and visceral. And I mean, I think great design,
Mhm.
you can feel it, or you know, in your body, or you
Right.
assume, you know, you can assume the feeling of it. And that's, so it, you know, good design feels really tangible and tactile in my mind.
Yeah, and you're immersed. You feel like you are definitely there. You're totally invested if you're watching this, and the world becomes totally real to you, right? Are you able to like watch a movie without seeing it through the lens as a designer and a visual producer? No, you're always sort of deconstructing it, right? Are you thinking about, I would do this better, or do you ever just allow yourself to relax and be entertained?
Um, it's never that I go, I would do this better. I have a pretty strong belief that I wasn't there a part of, like, I know how it can go in the design conversations when it comes to things. I might
Mhm.
question a choice. There's definitely been jobs where I've been like, what was that choice? And it's not from a right or wrong, but whether or not it serves the story. And the thing that I think most people don't realize is there's a ton of conversations that go into whether or not that creative choice makes it on camera or not.
Right.
And I once worked with an actress who did not like her legs. And we were doing a show set in the 60s during like mod 60s, which
Oh,
meant,
yeah.
you know, all legs.
It's all legs.
It's all legs. And this actress would not wear it. I could not lift her, the hem of her
Mm,
dress. She brought me a dress. She said, "This is what I will wear. And you can hem it 6 inches and that's it." And somebody actually asked me, "So tell me about that. Why that dress?" And I was like, I didn't choose
that's
it. That's what she was comfortable with. So
Mhm.
I know when I look at things, I never judge a choice that's made,
Mhm.
because I
Right. You
don't
don't know what
know
went
the,
into that. Yeah.
yeah, decisions that led to that. And I would hope that people would have that kind of grace for me with my works.
Sure.
If something doesn't work, I mean, and it's also hard to know, like, maybe someone's experimenting and trying something new and
Yeah.
didn't succeed like they had hoped. And, you know, that's part of this. We don't
Mhm.
always know, you know, if we're creating original imagery and original characters, there's really no way for us to know what's going to work until we're done.
Sure. Yeah. And I know there's so many moving parts too. And I remember Tony Shalhoub, who's a fantastic actor. He's always impeccable. And they asked him, like, how do you act in terrible films or shows sometimes? And he says, you put everything together, everyone does their best, but sometimes it's just assembled wrong later. And you see it and it's unfortunate, but one part might just not fit perfectly. And that's what it is. That's why there's just so much going on. That's why there's so much that has to be sort of organized and synchronized with it. But I saw one of your guests on your podcast mentioned, and she said, I'm a historian, I'm a psychologist, you have to, and when you're talking, I'm seeing so much about not just the history, not just the technology, not just the fashion, the trends, everything. How do you learn all of that? I know you have a degree, but are you constantly researching on your own? And when did you get started? Like, what really brought this passion out of you? Were you a kid just watching some kind of a movie and said, "Wow, I want to do this"? What was that impetus for you?
For me, I love this question. That's a good question. I actually started as a performer. Because I saw a
Cool.
show at 8 at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and I was like, whatever this thing is that's happening in front of me, like, I want that.
Right.
And of course, the narrative in our country and the narrative in our society is that the people involved are the directors, the actors, the producers. In film, it's the cinematographer and the writers. And no one really talks about the design. And so I grew up going, I'm going to be an actor. And so I trained
Hmm.
as an actor for like, I was like, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to be like Harrison Ford. I'm going to do all my own stunts. So I learned how to do mixed martial arts. I learned how to box, ride horses. You know, I had to learn how to, with one of my trainers, we were required to learn how to vault, which is like being able to stand and jump on and off of a moving horse for
Right.
safety.
Hmm.
And, you know, so I learned all these techniques. I learned archery. Like, I really was like, I'm going to be an actor. Do all my own stunts. I'm going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Then I lost my voice and
Mm,
I was like, now what? And I took a year off when I went to college. It happened right before college. So I took a year off and then I went and started trying all these other things in college. And I was like, I hate it. I hate everything. Like, I'm
mm,
dyslexic. So the idea of reading and writing for every class for 4 years was like, Why?
Yeah.
Why? What am I going to do with this random degree in a subject matter that like doesn't really excite me? And
Mhm.
my dad was like, well, you, you did your, you made your own prom outfit. And I was like, I don't know, I don't want to study acting and I don't know what to do. So now what? And my dad goes, well, you always made your prom outfit. You did all the sets. Like you always been really creative. Somebody's got to put clothes on all those actors. Why don't you go find out about that? And someone's got to paint the sets for all the plays at your school. So
Mhm.
just find out. And so I did, and that was it. And I fell into design and I was like, this is incredible. I love this. And
Mhm.
I was like, I just understood it immediately. Like it just
Mhm.
made sense to me. And so I just never looked back. And that was really how I fell into design and where this started. And because of that, I had trained as a performer with an LA casting director growing up. So she really got me into looking at character from a psychological standpoint, understanding what the driving factors of human existence to, and then you just start kind of going. I mean, in some ways, I think we know these things, right? We can go, well,
Right.
if I was doing this, I might make this choice because, these are three different reasons why I might do this action.
Mhm.
And so that starts to become the choice that we start looking at. And I always tell people when you're starting out, if you don't know where to begin with, like, let's say you are doing your own film because you can't afford to have a costume designer. So you're now going to design your own characters. Who in your life do you know that feels like those characters? Start there
Right.
and start with what you know. And then you can start pushing beyond that. And then every show is its own research project, which is why it's so
Yeah.
fascinating.
That's what I was gonna say. I could picture you just researching, and just sort of it's endless, really, right? I mean, you could just keep going for almost anything you're working on.
Yeah, you can. You have to kind of stop yourself. I was just thinking of this project I did, this feature that hopefully will come out this year called Abroad. And it was about this
Mhm.
Korean couple, and there's a character in it that I needed to design from a Korean standpoint and
Oh,
mix,
wow.
and so I did all this cultural research and I ran the ideas by my Korean assistant who is in Korea helping
Mhm.
me shop and purchase all of the Korean costumes and for our main characters. Like that was fun. We sourced the two main characters who are Korean. We sourced all their Korean wardrobe, the stuff that they came to the
Mhm.
States in Korea, and then that shipped over. And so that was
Oh, that
just
is so cool. I love
yeah,
that. That's exciting. So, you know what? It's almost like your career is different all the time. You're constantly pivoting and reiterating, and it's almost like a new career with every new project. Does it feel like that? Is that one of the things that really keeps you so motivated and passionate about it?
yes, 100%. It is that, and that is why I love it. Like I love that I did this Western this last fall and I got to go to Georgia and then we went to Tucson and I get to go live and work in these places that I otherwise wouldn't get to.
Yeah.
The other thing I love about our career, this industry is um, my dad had passed away back in the fall of 2021, suddenly and unexpectedly,
Oh,
and not COVID related.
mhm.
And the beauty of this job is I had like just finished a feature, so I was able to say I'm not available and just go home
Right.
with my family. And it's one of those things where I just think it's kind of the most amazing part of, I didn't have to ask anybody. Uh,
Exactly. You're working for yourself basically too. You're an entrepreneur, and so you have a lot of control about when you work, when you don't work.
yeah, and I think that's kind of amazing. I mean, it's easy for people to get into the if I don't say yes, I'm never going to work again or I'm never going to have any money. And uh, I recommend avoiding that and kind of looking at what that means and what would it take for you to then feel like you could do that,
Mhm.
to like, if that means saving up cash and putting stuff, just to, because for me, at least in that one moment with my family, it was the biggest gift that I didn't even
Right.
know the industry had provided. I mean,
Mhm.
granted, I didn't get paid for any of it, but like, I was able to say, I don't have to ask
Yes.
for permission to go be with
Right.
my family and be at my dad's deathbed. Like, that's an incredible gift.
Absolutely amazing too. I mean, I love that. I love that you get to sort of and that's the thing is like the industry gets such a bad rap and people say, well, you can't have stability, you can't have any good relationships, you can't and but that's the flip side of it. What you're talking about is actually you're working for yourself so you can create that time in a way that someone who has a 9 to 5 actually can't, where they are sort of chained down into that job. You get to, so there's a lot of freedom here that I think people don't always talk about that aspect. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Well, thanks. I mean, I do think there are some issues for sure in terms of, it is a challenging, like, and again, this goes back to kind of the morale of your crew.
Mm-hmm.
If we as producers and directors and filmmakers assume that other people are available for us at every moment, right? We are then devaluing that individual's life. And we are saying there are no boundaries. And so I think there is a really big challenge when it comes to being hired on a job, that productions do get to understand they get to have boundaries, that you don't get to call your people up whenever you feel like it, or message them at midnight and assume that they have read that email before they come into work and are actually on the clock again. Like, that's not respectful of their time. And that is a surefire way to then lose morale. And right, as I mentioned before, the beauty is I can say, hey, guess what? I'm not available anymore. And I can pass a project on to somebody else because I'm a day hire or a weekly hire, and someone else can take over the vision, or they can fill my spot and I can go take care of whatever I need to take care of.
Yeah, that is so liberating. That is just so awesome. And I love that so much. And that leads me into my next, because you're also doing a boutique, and I want to hear a little bit about that. And then this book, I'm really intrigued by this book and what we can look out for, and also when it will be released, when we can get it, where we can get it. So talk a little bit about being an author. Now you're an author and also a boutique owner.
So the boutique you're mentioning is a costume rental house in Brooklyn, New York. And it started as a private collection of just resources that I was accumulating with my business partner. We were designing films in our apartment with like a storage unit to house everything. And one summer it just became clear that that was not conducive in New York, right? We don't have a garage to prep in. It was, things were just literally in our living room. And I did a proof of concept that was like 100 background dressed in 70s period costumes, along with 18 principal costumes. And so our living room was literally a pathway with like trash bags mounted on one side and racks and bins on the other side. And then as soon as I cleared out my show, my business partner / housemate / best friend, who's also a costume designer, Alex Hoffman, was doing her project. And we were both like, okay, she did a feature. And we were both like, okay, we can't do this to ourselves again. Like, it's not a way to live. And like, this doesn't serve us. So we got a space, and then it just grew. And my family and I have extended family in Connecticut and outside of New York. And so they've been just donating and giving me things. And, I have my grandfather's hunting suit from the 30s, 40s, and like the 40s and stuff. That is some of my favorite things. So Abercrombie and Fitch used to do safari and hunting gear. And so it's like Theodore Roosevelt wore them.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so I actually have one.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
I have like Abercrombie and Fitch safari outfits from like 100 years ago almost.
Wow,
so
that is so awesome.
Yeah. And so all these things have been gifted, and suddenly it just became like, it's just sitting here. So let's open this resource up. And, New York doesn't have as many resources as LA, and it's sorely needed. So, working to kind of keep that open.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And I notice again and again in your bio, it talks about indie filmmakers. Why are you so passionate about indie filmmakers? Why do you love that community? It's a very unique community.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm a fan of the like underdog, and I feel like filmmakers are the underdog. I mean, and I work at majors. I do a lot of work on major films. I think that when you're on a majors film, you have a lot more resources and support to help you get over the line and create the vision you're actually thinking of. And even sometimes in spite of bad leadership, whereas in an indie film, you get to be a lot more resourceful, and, and odds are you're not going to make it to the majors until you've done an indie film. So, in a lot of ways. So that's why I think, and I think that's where predominantly too in the industry, majority of the filmmaking process is happening now.
Okay.
At least, I don't know. That's, we're starting to not see, we're either seeing like really large blockbuster films or indies that then get picked up or don't get picked
Right. Mm-hmm.
up by a major distributor.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for somebody who's very young, maybe a teenager or someone just coming out of college, and they don't know what they want to do? They just know that they want to be a part of the industry generally. What could you tell them? What advice can you give them? What advice do you give them when you're doing your workshops and stuff like that?
Get involved. Keep learning. I think the thing that, you asked if how have I kept, I know so much, how have I done it? I literally still study things as a filmmaker. I'm constantly looking for new information, looking for a new perspective, looking for filling a hole of information that I know I don't know versus there's three kinds of things. There's the things what you don't know, and then what you don't know. And the creative process is a lot of moving through, okay, here's what I know about this project, here's what I don't know, or here's what I don't know about this project, and then discovery truly happens in the I don't know what I don't know about this project. And once we start to dig into that then gives us those beautiful nuggets of opportunity that you only get if you actually start digging in the process. And so I kind of tell people that that's a piece of it. And also just get involved, start meeting people, get on set as quickly as possible. Even if it means you're sitting in crafty, do that. And then ask somebody a question and ask if, you can take a moment and see what it's like, because you've never been there. Or it's just a matter of starting to see how it happens and getting in the room. I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of, I guess I'll say, heat around whether or not unpaid work's acceptable. And I really want to be clear that people deserve to be paid, and that people and valued for what they do. And with that said, I also understand that as filmmakers, and we are looking to move our career forward, and that sometimes we have what we have and we're trying to make something with what we have. And I could, as a designer, could be resentful of that and make my life harder because I'm upset about something that's out of my control. Or I can honor the fact that this person is doing the best they can. And if that's truly what it is, right? If it's truly that this is all they've been able to raise and what they have, and they just want to create something to move their career forward, then I can get behind that, versus someone wanting to pay me less so that they can, for a larger wage gap disparity between different departments. That I have an issue.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and I always tell people that too. And it really comes down to the person's unique circumstances of what they can afford to do or not do. But basically it's like, if you're passionate about a project and they can't pay you, the experience itself might be something that you might evaluate and say, this is more valuable to me than going over there and getting a paycheck for something that I'm not being, challenged as much in. And I've made that decision in my life many times. So I encourage people, I mean, only an individual can decide in that moment what they're able to do, but it's not, I don't think there's a black and white sort of extreme thing where you can say for sure, you have to always get paid all the time or whatever. It's a case by case basis. And there are so many things that I've worked on where, there was just, the budget just wasn't there, but I believed in it, or I believed that maybe later on down the line, there would be a monetary reward, but you sort of just have to make those decisions in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people it's a little bit of a gamble. You don't really know when you say yes to a project, what it'll mean. I mean, I've done jobs where I worked my butt off and then they end up never airing.
Exactly.
And you go, oh my God, this is going to be the job. This is going to be the thing that catapults me forward. I'm so excited. And then they don't do anything with it. And I also go, it's that chicken and egg thing, right? Sometimes we have to do work in order to get work. And so and I look at it also as investing in your career. I mean, sometimes that's what's required. And I don't want to say that I agree with not paying people. I think that people deserve to be paid. And if you cannot afford to pay them, then you get to understand and have a sense of grace when they tell you that they're not able to be there. Because they have
Yeah.
to go.
It goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes both ways, right? Like, again, this goes back to what's the win-win situation for everybody. And if you want to have control over someone's full schedule, then be ready to pay their bills, right? They
Mm-hmm.
need to pay for their life. And, and I think that, but like, I just thinking of what we're talking about, I said yes. This is kind of amazing. So when I first moved to New York, I applied to literally be the laundry girl on a feature and do the laundry after they finish shooting at night. And
Wow.
then, but they're like, I think you're too qualified. And then, which they were right, because I just finished my graduate degree, but I didn't know anybody. So I was looking to meet people. And then I got offered my first feature and it worked out and I didn't have to worry about it. Fast forward, I interviewed for this show to design, and the director and producers decided to hire this other designer. And when they said the name, it happened to be the designer for the show that I had interviewed to intern on. And that worked in my favor because then I was like, I knew who it was. And I was like, oh, well, she just did a Paul Rudd film. Like, I totally understand like why you'd hire her over me. Like, that makes sense. No problem. Let me know if you need anything. Like, I'm just thinking it's such a cool project and I'm excited for you guys. And they go, well, we just lost our production designer. Would you be willing to do that? And I just said yes. And then I showed up and did the job, and I became friends with the costume designer that had gotten the job instead of me. And I also got nominated. It's so funny. I got nominated for best design on this project, my production design. And I was like, well, I guess I'm a triple threat designer now because I do costumes, lighting, and scenic now. And I started a friendship with that costume designer who later called me a couple months later to do a show where we got to go shoot in the desert in Utah. And
so
then
cool.
It was amazing. And then from that, she then called me to then do another project and then another project. And my first TV show, which was American Genius for National Geographics, was through her.
See,
And
it's all about relationship, who you know, your network, and invest in experience and invest in relationship, and those things down the line. Maybe it's not immediate, but you see the trajectories. I hear these types of stories again and again in all different sectors, but in the arts, it really, really comes through. I mean, it's a very powerful thing when people trust you and they know your work, and then just one door opens another door, opens another door.
Yeah. I mean, and like, for example, I said the film I did in the fall came from a contact who was like, I don't even think he was a producer on the job. I think he was like the production coordinator on this, my second feature. He called me 10 years later to say, hey, we're doing this project and we're trying to find a designer. We couldn't find anyone. And we realized we started going back into the archives of who we worked with. And he was like, I just remember you being really lovely to work with. And
that's amazing.
They were like, we want to work with you. You're it. And I was like, okay. So,
a full decade
of work later. Right. And so you really never know. I've had jobs come through because of actors recommending me. I got a film. So I didn't even know the actor personally. John Heater recommended me to the producers on this film called Tapawingo that he starred in, that hopefully also another one I'm hoping comes out this year. It's very fun, buddy comedy. And they had lost their designer the first week of production. So they called, everyone they knew. And the director for 18 and a half was like, oh, I just worked with Sarah and she knows period, call her. And like highly recommended me to John Heater's manager, who then passed my information to John Heater, who then passed my information to the producers. And they were like, so John Heater wants to talk, recommended you? And I was like, I've never worked with him.
That is so funny. Oh my gosh. What a great story.
And it was great. He's an amazing person to work with. He really sets the tone for an incredible work environment. And it was just a blast. So I'm forever grateful, because that's definitely like, the characters are quirky and I can't wait for that film to come out. But that was like
so cool.
Yeah. So that was like, you really like, I'm like, you never know, like after people you don't even know will recommend you and you'll be like,
it's the quality of your work and your reputation and how easy you are to work with. And that's another thing in the arts that people always think it's just purely talent driven. And of course the talent is what gets you in the door. But if you're not professional, if you're not good to work with, if you're not someone dependable, they'll call somebody else. But the fact that your reputation is so strong, that's how you have people thinking of you literally 10 years down the line. And who knows what will happen another 10 years down the line too. It's really interesting, really interesting. And it's really exciting to me to see how that kind of thing works. And I think that's good for the younger generation also to hear these stories, to realize, half what do they say, like half of success is just showing up, like show your face, like actually be there, like, and help out and be there on set, or even if you don't have a job, if you know someone on set and they allow you to go on there for any reason, like just be present and learn and just sort of soak everything up like a sponge, and find out also what you're passionate about, because your passion, Sarah, obviously it just bleeds through everything you do. You're so knowledgeable. I'm really looking forward to the book, because and I want to just mention the podcast again, because I learned so much about filmmaking just listening to your podcast. You go so deep, you are so meticulous. I've never heard anyone go that deep, so I can only imagine what your book is going to be like. And so I do want to say, as a final word to everybody, follow her. What are your preferred places for people to go and ethically stalk you? We call it ethical stalking. So where can people ethically stalk you? I know you're on TikTok. I know they can go to designingthevoid.com, but where are your preferred channels?
Instagram and Designing the Void are both at Sarah Cogan Design. So you can follow me there. And then I do have like a mailing list that I like drop what I call knowledge nuggets. I have it's also what I call my blog posts to myself are knowledge nuggets. And so you can find me there to get on that. I also have like a workbook that you can get you just sign in and you get a workbook on film design and the beginnings of film design on my website. So you can go to sarahcogan.com. So that's kind of where to find that. Before we move on really quick, I do want to say on the getting hired thing, what I think has served me the most is I always show up with the intention of making sure that whoever hired me, whether I'm assisting a designer or whether I'm the department head working directly with the director, that they know that they are taken care of and that they can trust that they can walk away and that I have it handled. And I will say that I think that is the number one reason why I have had such a successful career is I make it a point to make sure people are taken care of. Yeah. And I don't know, that's my perspective. I could be wrong.
I can tell that really talking to you, and you really hold it down. You're very much a leader. And, that's another thing is I can tell that you're a leader. You're a very confident person and you're a very clear person. And a lot of people who are super creative sometimes are not always that clear, not always that, decisive is the word. You seem to have it both. You have the left brain and the right brain. And those are the people that tend to really make a great impact. Right. And so I love that about you. And I could just spend forever. And, I'll tell everyone, I told Sarah, I'm like, okay, we're going to hit like maybe a half hour. There's no way to do Sarah Cogan in a half hour because there's so much going on. I have like 20 more questions. I want to be here. So maybe you'll come back. Maybe I can get you, maybe I can cajole you to come back, because I already know everybody's going to have a lot of questions for you. And, I have more. I'm thinking of them right now, but this, I love and appreciate your time so much, Sarah. And everybody go and follow her. I'll be following her. Check out the podcast. And when can we expect season 2 of Designing the Void? Is that going to be this year?
It is going to be this year. I get to figure out when that is. Okay. Probably the fall. I get to sit down and figure out, maybe sooner. I don't know yet.
That would be so cool. But you'll announce it at all of your, you'll announce it at sarahcogan.com and all of that. So we will be watching you and we'll be there. And I can't wait to listen to it because it is just absolutely amazing. And like I said, people bring notes because you're going to learn a lot. And if you're anyone who wants to get involved in the film industry at all, you would be really remiss if you did not tune into that podcast. And so I'll be there for season 2 too. Thank you so much, Sarah Cogan. You are amazing. Thank you so much.
It's so fun. And I would love to come back and answer any other questions because this is my favorite. And it's
thank you.
Joy to be here. So thank you so much.
We appreciate you so much. And good night, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you next time on Offstage.